You ready? All right, so you've ordered this cuff for this horse, and the goal of this thing is to get P3 aligned parallel to the top of it. Okay, or approximately parallel to the top of it. And then the reason it has this much wedge in it is that you're trying to establish a ground plane of P3 with the earth of about 18 to 20 degrees. So it's really best after you radiograph her before, and if she's sitting at about ground parallel in her current radiograph, then you can just put this shoe right on her and it's going to put her at 18. But if you don't want to dump her up to 25 or 30, and you don't want her at 10 either. So your horse looks like, I think she's going to be probably +3 or +4, looking at her foot off the ground. So you'll probably be pretty close if you just put her in it. Okay. Now, putting her in it, the problem with this shoe, what it can do is it can crush their heels because you're adding ground reaction force to the back of the foot. Do you want to get down more parallel with me? You're adding ground reaction force to the back of her foot because you're adding this height at the back. The good thing about this is what you're doing is it's almost like a conservative tenotomy, because by putting her at an 18 to 20 degree angle, you're putting slack around the back where the deep comes around the navicular bone. You're adding slack to that. And when you add slack to that, you increase blood flow to the foot. Now, you're mainly going to increase it to the front of the foot, but that's kind of where you want it right now. And you're going to actually be crushing the back of the foot just a little bit. But we can work with that, because your mare looks like she has pretty strong heels from the pictures I've seen of her. This is for the support limb now. All right, and I haven't seen pictures of it, but I'm assuming it looks similar to the other one. Okay, so the one main goal is you want the bottom of the bone, to be 18 to 20 degrees from the ground. Okay, and that's going to be sitting in here approximately parallel to the top of this shoe. Now, the reason that horses crush, this is a horse that doesn't look too different from your horse, because it's got an airspace back here under the bottom of the foot. I think your horse probably has an airspace between her heels and the bottom of her frog. That's what you're going to fill up with the gray rubber putty that I hope you ordered, called ACS, or Advanced Cushion Support. So you're going to fill this cavity, this hole, this airspace with that. All right. Now that's part of the thing that helps support the bony column, is that you've got all this gray putty in here. But if the hoof wall, outer perimeter of the hoof wall, touches this cuff, now yours is going to be one piece, but it's still a ridge. If the outer hoof wall touches that, then you're going to have a lot of ground reaction force come off the top of this shoe and start pushing up in these heels that you're already challenging because you're overloading them. And so the people that hate this shoe and think that it's evil are those that don't pay attention to that. And they allow the ground reaction force to get in the top, it's going to be in the top of the shoe because the shoe's on the earth. So the ground reaction force is going to be pushing up on this rim. They allow that to interact with her outer hoof wall here in this region. And then you can end up with it crushing her right here and causing her to bust her coronary band loose through her quarters. That's the worst complication of this shoe, is that they can actually create a separation. They're so crushed, as they create so much avascular necrosis through here. While you're trying to help the front, you crush the back and they bust their quarters open. That's a nightmare. You don't want that. Now, the way you're going to prevent her from busting her quarters open is, number one thing, you're going to make sure you have plenty of the ACS in there. All right, and really, Dr. Redden designed this so that you pick the foot up, you put the ACS in, you put the shoe on, and you let it all solidify with the hoof in the air, which means she's going to have to be blocked on her other foot while you're doing this. You really want it to solidify with you shoving it together, not her smashing it down. Because if the rubber is solidifying while the horse is pushing down on it, you're going to have some bust out the back. And you're not going to have as much positive pressure upward in the middle of the foot if some of it runs out the back on you. So ideally, the ACS would harden while the hoof is in the air and the shoe is just smashed against the foot. Okay, that's step number one of preventing a problem. Okay, or step number two, really. Prior to doing all that, what I do is I come in here and I find my outer perimeter of my sole plane and I bevel the hoof wall all the way around. And this is like a Pete Ramey trim. I do that trim on the foot so that this outer perimeter of hoof can't touch the top of that. The outer perimeter of the hoof wall cannot touch this hard thing. That's going to help a lot. And I've talked to people around the country that always do the Pete Ramey trim before they go into here, and they don't have a problem with heel crushing. Okay? Some people use a shoe on this. The horse is shod, and he's in this too. And they're always going to have ground reaction force on their outer hoof wall if they've got metal in here. So those horses will be really prone to crushing. The other ones that are really prone to crushing are the horses that are really underrun, severely underrun. Your mare, I don't think, is severely underrun, so that's in her favor. Okay, but I would bevel her hoof wall. I do it all the way around the foot. From here all the way around. I'd bevel the hoof wall with a rasp going like this, so that, at that angle, about 45 degrees to the ground, so that this part of the hoof, the outer perimeter of hoof, cannot come in contact with that. Okay? So the two things you're doing right up front is you're beveling the hoof wall to prevent crushing of the heel, and you're making sure your rubber putty has positive pressure upward by allowing the rubber putty to harden while the horse's foot is in the air. Okay, that's two things you're doing. Now what you're going to do is you're going to watch your growth rings. As this horse, over time, within about a week, you should see the growth ring getting wider at the front. Okay, and it'll be narrower at the back. Okay, and that's what you expect to have happen. But what you don't want to have happen is no growth at the back. Like if you look at my mare that I sent you that picture of, on the PowerPoint slides, a couple things you can see. You can see the rubber putty is almost holding her off of the cuff. You can see that her corner of her hoof wall is beveled right here. And if you look at her hairline, her hoof, her upper new growth, you're going to see a little tiny layer. Really examine this section of that slide, okay? Because I'd say about 5 millimeters away from the hairline, you're going to see a little layer of crust that are shaped like the tips of my fingers are right now. They're littler than my fingers, obviously, but they're all these little crusts that are running along right here. Okay? That was where the mare had jammed her quarter. And I came back and altered everything, made the bevels, more aggressive or whatever. And then just above that, you'll see, above that little row of crusts, proximal to it, you'll see a little bit of a normal color hoof growth, kind of a little bit of a shininess coming out of the coronary band. And it'll look a bit like an earthworm that's been laid across here. That's what you want. You don't want those crusts to be butted up against the hairline. If those little layer of crusts are butted up against the hairline, then that means there's no blood right here. Okay? Now you can do venograms on these feet if you like doing venograms and see, do a DP venogram and make sure you've got blood on a DP venogram coming around the corners. But if you don't want to fool with venograms, you don't know how to do with them, you're uncomfortable with them, then at least pay really close attention to the growth pattern. Okay, these crusts, you don't want them jammed up under the hairline. You want them moving away from the hairline over time. Now, those are the things to watch for. When you get to where this new growth ring out here is twice as wide as it is here, then you got to kind of be thinking about lowering her down a little bit. All right? Or you got to really be making sure your upper new stuff is nice. Okay? Because when you start getting growth two times here and half as much here, then you got to go, okay, am I crushing this heel too much? Have I outlived the usefulness of this device without it causing a problem? Okay? Because everything has a price to pay. And this shoe, if you use it too long or use it incorrectly, will destroy the heels. There's no doubt. But if you do all these things I'm telling you, I've not had it destroy the heels. Now, getting it to stay on, you can see a little bit of that in my slide I sent you. You saw I had Ready Roll and Vet Wrap around the pastern. Okay, what I do is tear a strip of Ready Roll in half and put it around the pastern and strap it on with Vet Wrap. Vet Wrap, yeah. Then I'm gonna tape to this thing the cuff. I'm gonna try to tape the shoe to the cuff. If you try to tape this shoe to her foot, it'll fall off every single day. And you do not want it falling off because it's such a big deal to block the other foot and get it on there. So go ahead and put that cuff on her. Okay? And then get Elasticon. And I use 3 or 4 inch. And you saw the first, on that other slide presentation, you saw the Elasticon. The first thing is to come down this way and under so that you're pulling it onto her foot. Okay? And then come back up around this way and then under. And up around this way and under. So you're constantly pulling it up And then after you've kind of pulled it up onto the foot with the tape going under and up, then you can do some spirals of tape around to cover the whole thing. Okay? Now, what to expect when you're doing this, if she stays in this a long period of time, the fact that she's growing hoof wall faster here than here is going to make her palmar angle on the bottom end up decreasing because her toe is going to be becoming elevated. Her toe will be elevated by her own hoof growth. So if she stays in it a month, you're going to have to keep re-radiographing her, pulling it off, trimming her foot to make her bone, her bottom of her bone parallel to the top of it again. And just keep setting her back up for success. But that's kind of the keys to it. Now the next thing you can do is a process where I thin the upper hoof wall. If I've got this beveled, I've got it padded, and I'm still not getting any growth here, but my other foot is not ready to bear weight yet, and then I'm gonna actually bevel this with a Dremel tool with a little sander wheel on it. I'm actually gonna thin this hoof wall right through here so that when I push on it, it's flexible. I'm gonna make this little section of upper hoof wall flexible, and the reason why is it's hard, it's like a rock, and it's pushing on my dermis. And if I make it flexible, then it can't smash the dermis under itself anymore. Okay? Now, so you may need, if you don't get your growth rings you want, you can send me pictures of the growth rings on the day you put it in and weekly if you want to, and I'll help you determine whether you're getting in trouble. But if you need to groove her, then I'll give you another tutorial on that. There's one more thing. Oh, the other thing you need to do for this mare is you need to walk her. Every time she unloads this foot, that's actually going to help her get blood in her foot. So forcing her to take steps is going to help save the other foot. Okay, that's something that they're doing at Rood and Riddle and places like that. Bramlage is having these people walk these horses. He actually has a protocol for walking, and the person that knows it is Magda. Magda Stewart knows the protocol that he uses for walking these horses. So it's like so many steps per day the first week, and then I don't know whether y'all been walking her at all.
She paces like a maniac.
Oh, okay, well that may be the reason she hadn't foundered yet.
Well,
because every time she lifts the foot, she's refilling it with lactate, with pyruvate. And when she's standing there pushing on it, it's getting lactate. It's getting anaerobic metabolism. But every time she lifts it, she's putting blood in it. So that may be the reason she hadn't already foundered if she's pacing. The more times she takes that foot off the ground a day, the less likely she's going to founder in that support foot. So maybe she doesn't need this if she's sitting there pacing constantly.